Call of Duty has given us dozens of soldiers to step into, but only a handful have actually mattered. The ones who stuck around, who shaped the story, who made you care about what happens next. From Cold War black sites to modern battlefields, these 6 operators define the franchise across generations, and it all starts with the man behind the cigar, the voice in your earpiece calling the shots. Captain John Price. Captain John Price is the most iconic operator in Call of Duty history, and he's not even the character you play as. That's the thing about Price. He showed up in Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare on November 5th, 2007 as a British SAS officer with the call sign Bravo 6, and immediately became the face of the entire franchise. But for most of the original trilogy, you're not him. You're watching him, following his orders, pulling the trigger because he told you to. And somehow that made him bigger. Price functions as the tactical leader and moral center of the entire Modern Warfare trilogy. He's the guy running operations against Imran Zakhaev in the first game and Vladimir Makarov across the sequels, making calls that shape the fate of nations while you, the player, are busy trying not to die in a hallway somewhere. He doesn't just participate in missions, he designs them, he decides who lives, who gets sacrificed, and when the rules stop applying. That kind of narrative authority is rare for a character you spend most of your time looking at rather than looking through. Here's where it gets interesting. The community has been arguing for over 15 years about whether Price or Soap McTavish is the true protagonist of the original Modern Warfare trilogy. Soap is the primary playable character in Call of Duty 4. You see the world through his eyes, you do the shooting, but Price drives every major plot point, holds more narrative weight, and carries more screen presence than anyone else in the room. He's technically a supporting character with main character energy, which is, not how that's supposed to work. His career is absurdly versatile too. We're talking airborne shock trooper, long-range reconnaissance operator, sniper, saboteur, jungle, desert, urban, covert. The man's resume reads like someone clicked every specialization in a character creator and somehow made it work. He's operated across more theaters than most protagonists have operated across games. But the really impressive part is that Price survived something almost no video game character survives: a full reboot. When Infinity Ward relaunched the Modern Warfare series in 2019, they rebuilt the entire timeline from scratch. New story, new continuity, new versions of classic characters, and Price walked into that reboot like he owned the place. Same hat, same attitude, same call sign. They gave him an updated backstory and a grittier tone, but his core identity stayed completely intact. He's one of the only protagonists in the entire franchise to cross generational boundaries and come out to the other side still feeling like himself. Now, one thing worth knowing, fans love to mix up details between the original trilogy Price and the reboot Price. The reboot describes his career as spanning everything from airborne operations to long-range recon, but people retroactively project those descriptors onto the original version, where they were never formally established. 2 different timelines, 2 different sets of canonical facts, same mustache, different lore. At the end of the day, Price's greatest trick is making you feel like he's the main character even when you're holding the controller. He's the guy giving orders while you pull the trigger, and that dynamic is exactly what makes him feel larger than life. But Price didn't do any of it alone, and the guy standing next to him for most of the trilogy has his own claim to the spotlight: Soap McTavish. Most first-person shooter protagonists are a pair of floating hands holding a gun. They don't grow, they don't change, they don't get promoted, they exist to reload and occasionally get yelled at by someone with a deeper voice. Soap McTavish is one of the only FPS protagonists in history who actually has a visible, multi-game character arc, and it's kind of remarkable that more people don't talk about it. When you first meet Soap in Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, he's a sergeant in the 22nd SAS Regiment. A sniper and demolitions expert, sure, but functionally the new guy. He's running CQB drills while Captain Price watches from the catwalk with his arms folded, deciding whether this kid is worth keeping around. You, the player, are literally being evaluated in the first 5 minutes. Price even checks your time on the training course like a disappointed PE teacher. Here's the thing, that relationship between Soap and Price isn't just window dressing, it's the foundation of a 3-game arc that takes Soap from the bottom of the chain of command to the very top. By Modern Warfare 2, he's been promoted to captain and appointed field commander of Task Force 141, one of the most elite multinational special operations units in the franchise. He's not taking orders anymore. He's giving them, Ghost, Roach, entire squads of operators are looking to him for direction. And that transition isn't just a rank change on a character bio page. Players who started with Call of Duty 4 and followed the trilogy through Modern Warfare 2 and 3 effectively grew up with Soap. You were him when he was nobody, and you were still him when he was calling in airstrikes and coordinating operations across 3 continents. That's genuinely rare in this genre, but what makes Soap's arc even more interesting is where he sits in the hierarchy. He's not the grizzled veteran, that's Price. He's not the mysterious subordinate operating in his shadow. That's Ghost. Soap occupies this middle position, the bridge between the mentor generation and the next wave of operators. Price taught him everything, and then Soap turned around and led Ghost and Roach through some of the most catastrophic missions in the franchise. The knowledge gets passed down, the responsibility shifts, and the new leader carries the weight that was once carried for him. The problem is that a huge chunk of the player base doesn't actually know any of this. If you entered the series at Modern Warfare 2, you met Soap as a confident, experienced field commander, barking orders and coordinating with Price as an equal. You'd have zero idea that 3 years earlier, this same guy was fumbling through his first live operation as the newest member of the SAS. His entire origin story, his mentorship under Price, the journey from uncertain newcomer to battle-tested leader, all of that gets compressed into, oh yeah, Soap, the guy with the mohawk, which is, not ideal. Because the full arc is what makes him special. Without the beginning, the ending doesn't hit the same way. Without watching him earn his place under Price, his eventual role as a leader feels hollow. Soap isn't just a cool call sign attached to a protagonist slot, he's proof that an FPS character can actually develop across multiple games if the writers commit to it. But if you think Soap's journey through the ranks is intense, wait until you meet a protagonist whose entire identity was rewritten inside his own head. Alex Mason. Most Call of Duty protagonists are exactly what they look like. Soldiers. Good guys. Point and shoot. Alex Mason is the first one where the game looks you dead in the eye and says, hey, you know everything you just played through? Yeah, that might not have actually happened. Mason is the central protagonist of Call of Duty Black Ops, released in 2010, and he represents the franchise's hard pivot from straightforward military action into full-blown psychological thriller territory. He's a U.S. Marine Corps captain, a CIA asset, and a member of Operation 40, which was a CIA assassination squad embedded in Cold War covert operations. Not peacekeeping, not defense, targeted killings and deniable interventions, the kind of stuff that doesn't show up in official reports because officially, it never happened. But here's the thing. Mason's story isn't told like a normal Call of Duty campaign. His entire narrative is filtered through interrogations and fragmented flashbacks. You're not experiencing events in real time. You're watching a man try to piece together his own shattered memory while strapped to a chair, being screamed at by people who may or may not be on his side. Every mission you play could be exactly what happened, a distorted version of what happened, or something that was planted in his head entirely, and that's because of the numbers. Mason was subjected to Soviet brainwashing, psychological conditioning so thorough that it fundamentally compromised his autonomy. The mysterious number station, the Rusalka, his obsessive fixation on sequences he can't explain. These aren't just plot devices, they're the game telling you that the character you're controlling might not be in control of himself. His iconic line about the Rusalka, about knowing where the number station is because he saw it a long time ago, that's not a triumphant revelation, that's a programmed response firing off exactly the way someone designed it to, which makes Mason arguably the most unreliable protagonist in FPS history. Every other Call of Duty protagonist, you trust what you see through their eyes. With Mason, trusting what you see is the entire trap. Here's where it gets even more loaded. The game reveals that Mason was actually present in Dallas, Texas on November 22, 1963, the day of the Kennedy assassination. During the mission, you can see Mason in the crowd, and the game heavily implies, through its brainwashing storyline, that Mason himself may have been programmed to pull the trigger. The game never explicitly confirms it for you, but it absolutely wants you to sit with that possibility. The framing is deliberately ambiguous, and the implication is sitting right there on the table for anyone paying attention. Then Black Ops 2 comes along and makes everything worse. The game introduces branching narratives that directly affect Mason's fate, and depending on your choices, he either survives or he doesn't. The community has been arguing for over a decade about which ending is actually canon. Some players point to later games as evidence that he lived, others argue the death ending is thematically stronger and more consistent with the series' tone. And then there are the fan theories suggesting Mason's identity might be more fluid than any of the games explicitly reveal, that the brainwashing didn't just alter his memories but potentially fractured who he fundamentally is. Nobody has a definitive answer. And honestly, that might be the point. Mason isn't designed to be fully understood, he's designed to make you uncomfortable with how little you actually know about the person you've been playing as for hours. Every other protagonist on this list you can summarize in a sentence: Mason. You can't even confirm what he did and didn't do. He's the first Call of Duty character who made players realize that the person holding the gun might be the scariest thing in the room. But if Mason's mind is a battlefield, the guy standing next to him through all of it is the complete opposite. Frank Woods doesn't do ambiguity. Frank Woods. Most Call of Duty characters get one war, maybe two if the sequel does well. Frank Woods got an entire lifetime. Born March 20th, 1930 in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, raised in Philadelphia during the Great Depression, this guy was forged in hardship before he ever picked up a rifle. And once he did, he basically never put it down. Woods first shows up in Black Ops as part of Alex Mason's squad, running covert operations in Vietnam alongside Mason and Joseph Bowman as members of the Studies and Observation Group. And right away, he establishes himself as the guy who doesn't have time for your existential crisis. Mason's hearing numbers in his head, questioning reality, spiraling into Cold War paranoia, and Woods is over there like, cool. Are we killing people or not? Because I'd like to get back to killing people. That's his entire energy. While Mason's story is cerebral and psychological, Woods keeps everything grounded in raw, boots-on-the-ground soldiering. He's not worried about brainwashing or sleeper agents. He's worried about the guy shooting at him right now. And that contrast is exactly why the dynamic works. Every conspiracy needs a guy who just wants to do his job, and Woods is that guy with zero apologies. But here's where it gets interesting. Woods comes back in Black Ops 2 as the Protagonist, and during the mission Suffer With Me, he actually becomes playable. The number of supporting characters in Call of Duty who earn playable status is incredibly small. Most side characters get a cool line, maybe a dramatic death scene, and then they're done. Woods got promoted, and his story spans decades. From the 1960s Vietnam operations all the way into the 1980s and beyond, Woods is one of the only characters in the entire franchise whose arc covers that much in-universe time. You literally watch this man age. Young, sharp, coarse-humored operator in Vietnam. Battle-scarred, wheelchair-bound old soldier decades later, still telling war stories. The toll of warfare on a single human being laid out across 2 full games. Which is, not something most shooters even attempt. He also functions as the emotional bridge between 2 generations of Masons. He's Alex Mason's closest brother in arms during the Cold War, the guy who'd take a bullet and then complain about the caliber, and later, he becomes a connection point for David Mason, Alex's son. Woods is the living memory of everything Alex went through. He's the receipt. His loyalty is what defines him more than anything else. In a franchise full of betrayals, double agents, and psychological manipulation, Woods is stubbornly, almost aggressively loyal. He doesn't switch sides. He doesn't have a hidden agenda. He's just a soldier who picked his people and stuck with them for 50 years. In the Call of Duty universe, that practically makes him a unicorn. Now, the community has done what the community always does. Theories from Black Ops 4's Project Blackout speculate about archetype resurrection, suggesting that Mason and Woods' identities may have been merged or that Woods could be a reconstructed version of Mason. Here's the thing though. These theories rest on extremely thin canonical evidence. A few ambiguous cutscenes from a battle royale mode do not overwrite 2 full campaigns worth of established character. Woods is Woods. He was born in 1930 in Pennsylvania. He has his own military record, his own personality, his own story. The speculation is fun, but it's speculation. What makes Woods genuinely special isn't some hidden twist about his identity, it's the simplicity of his role. He's the guy who refuses to die. Every time the story tries to kill him off, write him out, or sideline him, he shows back up. Older, angrier, probably in more pain than he'll ever admit, but still there. Still Frank Woods. In a series obsessed with mind games and conspiracies, sometimes the most compelling character is just a stubborn old soldier who won't quit. But if you think loyalty and longevity are enough to make a character iconic, wait until you meet someone who became a global phenomenon with barely any screen time and a skull mask. He never takes off. Simon Ghost Riley. Most Call of Duty protagonists earn their legendary status by doing something. Ghost earned his by hiding his face. Lieutenant Simon Ghost Riley showed up in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 on November 10, 2009 as a member of Task Force 141, and within about 30 seconds of screen time, he became one of the most iconic characters in shooter history. Not because of what he said, not because of some incredible character arc, because he wore a skull on his face and barely talked. That's it, that's the formula. And it worked better than anything Infinity Ward could have possibly planned. Here's the thing about Ghost. He's a British Special Forces lieutenant with a genuinely horrific backstory. He grew up in Manchester, England, with a father who was, to put it mildly, not great. The man routinely brought dangerous animals into their home, exposing young Simon to the kind of fear and chaos that most people only experience in nightmares. His childhood was essentially a survival exercise he never signed up for. And while the games don't spend a ton of time unpacking this, it explains everything about the man he became. The stoicism, the emotional distance, the fact that he communicates primarily through tactical callouts and uncomfortable silences, but none of that is why people love him. People love Ghost because of the skull-patterned balaclava and those dark red sunglasses. Full stop. That visual design did more heavy lifting than any dialogue tree or cutscene ever could. In a franchise full of realistic military operators wearing standard issue gear, Ghost walks in looking like the Grim Reaper joined the SAS, and nobody questioned it. The mask turned him from another British soldier into a walking symbol, something closer to myth than man. And the community ate it alive. Now, there's an ongoing debate about whether his look is remotely realistic for actual special operations. The skull balaclava, the bright red sunglasses, none of it exactly screams covert. You'd get spotted from about 400 meters away on a clear day, which is, not ideal for someone whose job involves not being seen. But the community has largely made peace with this. It's a deliberate dramatization. The mask isn't designed to be tactically sound. It's designed to be burned into your memory. And on that front, mission accomplished. What makes Ghost genuinely fascinating from a design perspective is his opacity. He's literally masked and figuratively obscured. You never really learn what he's thinking, you never see his full face, you get fragments of backstory, a traumatic childhood here, a stoic one-liner there, but the game never opens him up the way it does with Price or Soap. And that's entirely the point. Ghost is a blank canvas wearing a skull. Players project whatever they want onto him. He's their version of cool, their version of dangerous, their version of broken. The less the game tells you, the more you fill in yourself. It's character design through subtraction, and it's borderline genius. This partial mystery has fueled one of the more persistent fan theories in the modern warfare community. When the 2019 reboot introduced a character named Alex, who conveniently died in an explosion but whose body was never confirmed, fans immediately started connecting dots. The theory goes that Alex survived, adopted a new identity, and eventually became Ghost. People parsed visual similarities, unresolved narrative threads, and the suspicious timing of Alex's disappearance relative to Ghost's appearance. Is there hard canonical evidence for this? No. Has it stopped anyone? Absolutely not. The theory lives on because Ghost's entire appeal is built on unanswered questions, and the community will keep asking them whether Infinity Ward answers or not. And that's really the lesson of Ghost. He's proof that sometimes the most powerful thing a character can do is nothing. No grand speeches, no dramatic betrayals he orchestrates, just a skull mask, a traumatic past, and the discipline to keep his mouth shut. Players have spent over 15 years obsessing over what's behind the balaclava, writing fanfiction, building theories, demanding more screen time, all because Infinity Ward had the restraint to show less. Sometimes mystery isn't a gap in the writing, it's the whole strategy. But if Ghost proves that hiding a face can build a legend, the next protagonist proves that inheriting one is a completely different kind of burden. David Mason. Every protagonist we've covered so far had their fate decided for them. The developers wrote their story and you watched it play out. David Mason is the one where they handed you the pen and said, you figure it out. Born in 1979 to CIA agent Alex Mason and raised in Fairbanks, Alaska, David grew up in the shadow of a father who was either a hero or a monster, depending on which ending you got in the first game. His dad disappeared, the details were messy, the legacy was messier, and David spent his entire adult life carrying the weight of Cold War operations he had zero involvement in but couldn't escape from. Which is, not ideal. He's the main playable protagonist of Call of Duty Black Ops 2, released November 13th, 2012, and this game changed everything about how Call of Duty told stories. It was the first entry in the franchise to feature futuristic warfare technology, and more importantly, branching storylines driven entirely by player choice. You weren't just along for the ride anymore. Your decisions actively determined who lived, who died, and whether the whole thing ended in triumph or tragedy. David serves as a member of SEAL Team 6 and eventually commands all JSOC Strike Force missions conducted from the USS Barack Obama, a futuristic aircraft carrier that sounds like someone lost a bet naming it, but is actually one of the coolest staging grounds in the series. From that ship, he coordinates advanced operations using next-generation technology, drones, and remotely piloted assets that make the Cold War gadgets his father used look like toys from a cereal box. But here's where David gets truly interesting. His arc isn't just about fighting Raul Menendez or stopping a cyber terrorism plot. It's about reckoning with the consequences of his father's moral compromises. Everything Alex Mason went through during the Cold War, the brainwashing, the assassinations, the paranoia, all of that echoes forward into David's battlefield. He's not just fighting a new war, he's cleaning up the debris from an old one. The generational connection between father and son gives Black Ops 2 a thematic weight that most Call of Duty campaigns don't even attempt. David's journey is essentially asking one question: can you break the cycle, or are you doomed to repeat it? And the answer depends entirely on you. The branching paths in Black Ops 2 can determine the fates of David, Alex, Frank Woods, and Menendez across multiple possible endings. Some endings are hopeful, some are devastating. In one path, David gets closure. In another, he loses everything. The game doesn't tell you which choice is right, it just makes you live with the one you made. Here's the kicker. No single canonical ending has ever been explicitly declared by the developers. Think about that for a second. Every other protagonist on this list has a defined story, a beginning, middle, and end that the writers locked in. David Mason doesn't. His entire identity exists in a state of narrative superposition, simultaneously alive and dead, successful and failed, redeemed and condemned, depending on which save file you're looking at. That makes him one of the most structurally ambitious protagonist experiments the franchise has ever attempted, and the franchise has done absolutely nothing to resolve it. Black Ops 3 jumped to an entirely new cast in a more distant future. Black Ops 4 shipped without a traditional campaign. Cold War circled back to the gap between the first two games. Every subsequent entry has carefully sidestepped the question of what actually happened to David Mason. The community has been debating this for over a decade. Which ending is real? Did he survive? Did he get closure? Nobody at Treyarch has given a definitive answer. And honestly, that deliberate silence might be the most interesting thing about him. David Mason is a character whose canon fate remains genuinely unresolved over a decade after his first appearance. He carries his father's sins, the player's choices, and the franchise's most ambitious narrative experiment all on the same pair of shoulders. Most Call of Duty protagonists are defined by what they did. David is defined by what you decided he would do. And that's what makes him unlike anyone else on this list. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.